Sanguine Blade buffs, huh? I am not looking forward to more Nocturne. Hello Summoners, and welcome back to another high ELO tier list. Once again, for patch 10.9 of course, we're going to tell you guys which champions are the strongest picks in high ELO. Patch 10.9 has been full of various content, so we're excited to make a few shifts to our tier list this patch. We'll be going over the changes that have hit Summoner's Rift on patch 10.9 as well as we progress through this video, so stay tuned. However, if you haven't already, make sure to check out our 10.9 patch rundown video because we cover everything in depth there. Remember that all of this stuff is at the end of the day speculation, so you might see some changes in our next video. Now, for our question of the day, which champion is overhyped in your opinion? Personally, I think that Vayne players are given too much credit. Sure, they make some sick plays, but most other marksman champions can only dream of having as much mobility as her. She has so much of her power budget dedicated to her ability to navigate through fights that I feel like it should be expected that she can be a little bit flashier than other marksmen. Let me know what your answers are down below. First things first, let's run through the top lane. If you aren't aware, Sanguine Blade received a buff this patch, and this will likely cause a decent number of shifts up in the top lane. Its cost was reduced by 100, and its damage was increased from 50 to 55. Wukong nerfs have been long due, and they've finally arrived. Wukong's armor was reduced from 34 to 31, his Q damage from 30 to 130 to 20 to 120, and his clone's damage from 40 to 60% to 35 to 55%. Even in high ELO, Wukong has been an S+ tier pick, and everyone is spamming him into oblivion. In spite of these nerfs, we don't think Wukong will be dropping out of the S+ tier status anytime soon. While these nerfs will be noticeable, we don't think they're significant enough to stop his tyranny over the top lane. On the other hand, we have some buffs coming Gnar and some other champions' ways. Mega Gnar's Q refund has gone up from 60% to 70%, and Mega Gnar's E damage has gone from 50 to 190 to 80 to 220 damage. Gnar's E is an extremely risky ability to use aggressively. By buffing the damage on it significantly, players will now be rewarded much more heavily for committing to fights, giving up their escape tool for a sizable amount of damage. At the end of the day, this buff isn't going to be huge, but Gnar players may enjoy those buffs to Sanguine Blade. We're keeping him in the C tier for now, but if he starts popping off, we'll let you guys know in our next video. Another champion who was buffed was Quinn. Quinn received a buff to her Q this patch. Her Q's near-sight duration has gone up from 1.5 seconds to 1.75 seconds. Quinn has been an unpopular but powerful pick in high ELO because of her lane pressure, as well as how powerful her roams are. She's going to benefit heavily from the Sanguine Blade buffs as well, so we're moving her up to the A tier for now. Our analysts think that they've been underrating her for a while now, and that this placement is much more appropriate for her. Next is Cho'gath. Cho'gath's E damage went up from 22 to 70 to 22 to 84. This is a rather minor buff, and we don't think it'll change his performance too much in high ELO either. A buff is a buff, but we're keeping Cho'gath in the C tier for now. Our S+ tier remains unchanged, with Darius, Wukong, and Fiora continuing their reign over the top lane. Even in high ELO, these champions can take over the game because of their various strengths: lane dominance, team fighting, and split pushing respectively. The S tier features Kled, Shen, Jax, Renekton, and finally its newest member, Maokai. Maokai has been continuing to show strong results, and even players in Diamond, Masters, and Challenger are finding a great deal of success with him. He's reliable, deals enough damage, and provides a ton of utility for his team. Next up, let's run through the jungle. First up, Kayn received a massive buff. His Q's cooldown has gone down from 7 to 5 seconds to 6 to 4 seconds. The bonus damage on it now applies to minions, and his W's slow has gone up from 70% to 90% that decays. While he hasn't been doing too hot in high ELO, these buffs are huge. We've moved Kayn up to the B tier because our analysts especially expect his red transformation to become much more powerful. The lowered cooldown on his Q will make Kayn an even strong drain tank, and players are definitely going to be able to abuse this. On the other hand, Karthus has received a nerf. His base movement speed was reduced from 335 to 325. We talked about this in our normal patch rundown, but essentially this nerf does virtually nothing to his clear speed. What it does do, however, is make Karthus easier to hunt down, while also making it harder for him to chase his opponents. Essentially, counterpicking Karthus means that you have an even better chance of killing him than before, because he's a good deal slower than before. He'll remain in the S tier for now, however, because at least later into the game, Karthus players don't really mind dying as long as they get to press R. You know, that thing he does when he outplays you. Trundle was also hit with nerfs. He's been doing way too good of a job keeping tanks in check, which is his job, but there is such a thing as being overqualified. The cooldown on his ultimate has been increased from 100 to 60 to 120 to 80, especially in higher ELO, where fights occur much more often. This nerf is going to hurt. Trundle, unfortunately, won't have his ultimate ready for every fight. Sometimes he's going to have to fight without it, meaning that he might actually die, and equally as importantly, the enemy tank player might actually live. A single team fight victory means a lot, so this nerf is massive. However, we don't think it's big enough to take Trundle out of the A tier. He's still a great counter pick and answer to a lot of other champions, so he's not going to suddenly drop off the radar because of these nerfs. Next, let's talk about our tier list. Our S+ tier now consists of Rek'Sai, Elise, Wukong, Graves, and Fiddlesticks. Graves and Fiddlesticks have been doing exceptionally well in Diamond and higher. On top of this, Graves will likely benefit from the Sanguine Blade buffs. They'll not only increase his already incredible clear speed, but he'll also be able to take neutral objectives and push for towers much more effectively as well. Fiddlesticks has been killing it, but that was somewhat expected. Players are getting better at him, so his win rate is climbing. It's as simple as that. The S-tier champions are still Lee Sin, Karthus, Kha'Zix, Rengar, and Zac. Zac will definitely enjoy this patch a lot more since Trundle received a nerf. We still think that the champions in these two tiers are arguably the hardest carries in high elo because of how much damage they deal alongside the way they can impact the most crucial stages of the game. Compared to champions in lower tiers, it feels like these ones can use extra gold from takedowns and make their presence known. While Fiddlesticks is extremely powerful, he's not receiving nearly enough bans anymore in high elo. You'll definitely want to try and lock him in as he can wipe out entire teams and hard carry games with a single good ultimate. We're also going to make sure to take a careful look at Nocturne as a result of these Sanguine Blade buffs. There's a good chance he pops off once again. Next, we're moving into the mid lane. As most of you might already know, Lissandra received a buff this patch. Her Q's cooldown was reduced from 10 to 4 seconds to 8 to 4 seconds. Shaving off 2 seconds from her Q early on is huge, because now she'll have an easier time contesting pushes and trading with her opponents as well. Lissandra has often been a crowd favorite amongst high elo and professional players because of how much impact she has on games. Her oppressive yet easy to execute roams and team fighting make her an easy fit into the meta whenever she's not considerably weaker than the rest of the roster. While she's still not going to be where she was in the past, we've moved Lissandra up to the B tier because this buff still looks somewhat promising. Our tier list sees numerous minor shifts. First up, our S+ tier welcomes a new member in Talon. In spite of previous nerfs, he's still stomping noobs on Summoner's Rift. Talon's aptitude toward one-shotting enemies and snowballing makes him a solo queue superstar champion. He thrives in the environment extremely well and can press leads for early 20-minute or even 15-minute surrenders. Aside from him, we also have Katarina and Echo in the S+ tier. Our S tier is now comprised of Diana, Cassiopeia, Vladimir, Fizz, Wukong, and 2 new members, Galio and Syndra. Galio is showing even more than before that he is an absolute titan in the mid lane. In Korea, he's considered one of the strongest mid laners in the entire game, and for good reason. He's a great pick into many AP champions, has solid wave clear, brings crowd control to the table, and can also protect his allies. He's a great mix of damage and utility is the easier way to say it. Syndra, on the other hand, has been moved up here simply because of her play rate. She's got solid statistics otherwise, but the fact that high elo players are often picking her means that she's arguably the most versatile mid laner at the moment. Syndra is essentially an assassin, but an AP carry at the same time. Whether her team needs some more pick power, disengage, consistent damage, or the ability to one-shot a priority target, Syndra covers them all. She's also relatively safe because of her medium range and her E to push enemies off of herself. Qiyana has been moved down to the A tier. She's still a solid pick in high elo, but is outshined by other AD assassins in the mid lane at the moment. As a final remark for the mid lane, lock in Galio and abuse him before it's too late. With that said, let's move on to the bottom lane. While there weren't any bottom lane balance changes this patch, there are still a couple of things we want to talk about. Like in our patch rundown video, our analysts still believe that Ezreal deserves a spot on the S+ tier in high elo as well. He's usually a reliable pick, as long as it's not someone first timing him. Ezreal's safety, oppressive range, and high mid-game damage output merit him as one of the strongest marksmen in the game right now. Coordination is tough in solo queue, and without it, it's even harder to take him out. Diving him one by one is the biggest mistake you can make, but it's bound to happen because it's solo queue. Ezreal's E cooldown is reduced whenever his Q lands, and as you'd expect in high elo, players are pretty good at landing their shots. Therefore, our S+ tier now consists of Misfortune as well as Ezreal. I still don't know why Misfortune hasn't been nerfed, but that's a story for another day. She's simply way too oppressive, and the old motto, win lane, win game, is oftentimes quite true. The S tier consists of Senna, Cassiopeia, and Heimerdinger. In spite of nerfs, Senna is still a powerful pick in high elo, and she cannot be written off for her mix of damage as well as utility. Finally, we've added Zigs to the high elo tier list as a result of his success in competitive play. We excluded him previously because of low pick rates, but we expect more players to pick him up now that he's seen play in professional leagues. Ziggs is a solid AP carry to round out damage splits because he's great at taking turrets, clearing waves, and one-shotting opponents when farmed up. At the moment, the bottom lane feels like a free-for-all. There are a ton of viable picks, and you should try to pick whatever you're comfortable with, as long as it doesn't int your draft. To wrap things up, we now talk about supports. First, let's talk about nerfs. Bard is one of the 2 support champions who was nerfed this patch. Bard's utility is taking a big hit. His W's movement speed bonus has gone from 50% to 30%. His W's cooldown has also been increased from 12 to 14 seconds. Finally, his E's cooldown has gone up from 18 to 14 to 22 to 16. Especially in high elo, where players are better at playing around Bard's utility, this is going to hurt. Nevertheless, we'll keep Bard in the S tier because of how evidently powerful he's been in high elo. These nerfs are going to hurt, but Bard was already so powerful that he'll still be a solid pick after them. Bard's damage was left untouched, so he'll still be able to dominate lane and help control early dragons for his team. Next up is Nami. Nami's base HP has been reduced from 489.32 to 475. Her base mana from 277.24 to 265. And her passive's movement speed bonus from 60 to 45. These nerfs are intended to weaken her for average players, but these nerfs are likely going to hurt her more in high elo than down there. She's a little squishier now, and it's likely that players are going to try and capitalize on this. Her spells now give a little less movement speed as well, so she won't be as oppressive as before. These nerfs aren't big enough to push her out of the A tier, so Nami will comfortably remain there. Fiddlesticks received a buff too, aimed at his role as a support specifically. Fiddle's E damage has been increased from 70 to 190 to 70 to 210. He just hasn't been the same annoying scarecrow as a support ever since his rework. His old E was way, and I really mean it when I say way too good. It was oppressive and left basically no counterplay. After his rework, he's been a much stronger jungler, but he definitely hasn't been able to do what he used to do as a support. Fiddlestick's laning isn't nearly as powerful as before, so he'll remain in the C tier for now. Our support tier list remains unchanged for this patch, but we'll need to keep eyes on Maokai, Galio, and Yuumi because they've been slowly creeping. That concludes our 10.9 high elo patch rundown. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and also subscribe so you can stay up to date with all the different kinds of content we're releasing. Also, like I mentioned earlier, check out ProGuides.com if you're serious about climbing this season. Until next time, best of luck on Summoner's Rift, guys.